Renters all across British Columbia are cheering from the top of mountains about the rent controls introduced by the BC government. But the problem is landlords, well, they're doing a second take and shaking their heads at some of the recent developments that have been introduced to protect renters in this province. If you're new to our YouTube channel and you have no idea what I'm talking about, you're going to want to check out this video here, which is linked in the description, about some of the rent controls that have been introduced in British Columbia over the last few years and the impact that they are going to have on the rental market. The most recent debacle, where the BC government elected that it was a good idea that a landlord needed to give a renter 4 months notice for them to vacate the property even when the property was being sold, was a complete gong show. To the point where days later, the BC government completely reversed their stance and backed off this crazy policy. The reason they backed off is because they clearly did zero due diligence and zero consultation with industry before coming down with heavy-handed, self-righteous, and dogmatic policy that they didn't understand. This is very concerning, obviously, because these are the very people that we collectively have elected to help lead us as a group of people, as well as help our province and the people of our province prosper. So if you're a tenant or a landlord or someone who is just simply aspiring to buy a property in British Columbia, the conversation for today's video is, do rent controls really work? When the government starts imposing restrictions on the people that rent out properties to people who potentially can't afford properties, does this create a more healthy rental environment, or does it simply make things worse? If you're curious what rent controls are, they are varying between rules and regulations from place to place, but mostly rent control consists of caps on price increases within the duration of a tenancy and sometimes beyond the duration of a tenancy, as well as restrictions on eviction. If you're a tenant watching this video right now, I know exactly what you're thinking. This is just another rah pro-landlord video. This guy doesn't get it. He doesn't understand how hard it is to be a renter in this province. And you're probably starting out this video thinking that I have no support for tenants' rights, which could be the furthest thing from the truth. However, I do want to make sure I tell you what I do support. I support smart government policy. I am pro housing for all, those that can afford it and those that cannot afford it. And another thing I support is a fair balance for both parties in a transaction, and in this case, we are referencing both landlords and tenants in the province of British Columbia. Since I first began selling real estate in Surrey, BC, and the surrounding municipalities way back in 2007, I've noticed a trend over the last few years. I have helped so many investors get into the market and fulfill their dreams of owning a rental unit to not only help provide for their future income, but also to help provide housing accommodations for people who maybe can't afford it. Well, like me and most of my other colleagues, this has really changed over the last 5 years, where the bulk of my investor clients have really given up on the idea of buying more investment properties, but rather getting out of property investment altogether to go focus on more lucrative, more profitable, or simply simpler ways of investing their money. They've seen that some of these rental controls and the writing on the wall is just not a space where they want to invest their money. And the thing is they're not alone. A video that we produced for this YouTube channel not so long ago, all about the problems with what the government is doing with rent controls, specifically the 4-month notice period that they had announced before they really thought about it, called The Death of Private Rentals in BC, Tenants and Landlords Both Use, was our biggest video ever and completely blew up. At the time of filming this video, it's got over 36,000 views, 645 comments, and 2,080 likes. Now, as you can imagine, there was many people renting properties in BC that commented on this video, and they expressed their disinterest and their dislike for the video because they were acting strictly out of emotion, realizing that, yeah, it's expensive to live in British Columbia and rent a property. But I want to show you what the landlord said. Things like, yep, taking mine off the market. You can't even stop renting once you start. Too good, reasonably priced rentals, finito. Or what about this comment? 200% accurate. Have been a landlord for decades. Now I'm trying to quit being a landlord. It's too risky to own rental properties under current extreme bias policies. This government is only good for if you are either extremely wealthy or only seeking a place in social housing. Sucks for someone in between. Or what about this one? I deregistered my suite and immediately saved $1,400 plus on city utilities, saved money on insurance, and saved on wear and tear. I now have an extra parking spot. If a stranger's around my house, they won't be for long. My stress is way down, we got our home back. Or lastly, my husband and I just sold 3 units, not worth the stress, risk, and aggravation. Those are supposed to be our supplement retirement income. Not sure what we will do now. Maybe we will become renters and live from CPP and OAS. Here's the takeaway from these comments from landlords. All landlords are referencing that they have either taken the rental units off the market or will be taking the rentals off the market, which if you're a tenant is a huge problem. So here's the premise of this video. If you give me the next few minutes of your time, I want to show you the impact of rent controls and what they've had on provinces like BC and Ontario and compare them to other provinces in Canada that don't have rent controls. I'm going to show you the difference of exactly what those have done and let you decide whether they're effective or not. And if you're a tenant watching this video, I'm going to say something that you're probably not going to like. You're actually part of the problem. You are helping these landlords profit off of renting their properties, their investment properties to you. So if you don't like that and you want to be part of the solution, make sure you hang around to the end of this video because I'm going to give you 2 ways to make that possible. One of them is a free offering that has a value of about $350, my gift to you. So if that all sounds good, let's get into it. Hey, it's Darren here. If you're thinking of moving to Surrey, White Rock, or any of the surrounding suburbs, subscribe below so you can be the first to learn about the market and the areas. And like so many others, we've helped in the process of buying or selling a home. If you need help in the process, whether it's today or 6 months from now, use the link in the description to book a time to speak with me. We'll help you make sure that your move is the absolute best that it could ever be. So on the surface, if you're a tenant or somebody that rents a property in British Columbia, rent controls seem like an excellent idea. This means things like the rental price of the place you're renting, well, it can't go up more than a certain amount each year. Or maybe there's restrictions on the landlord's ability to evict you, or there's restrictions on the landlord's ability to sign a fixed term lease that ends at a certain date, all of which are actually very real in British Columbia. We did a video on this that looks just like this, which is also linked in the description below. In the end, what does a tenant really want? Well, they want a safe and secure home. They want a stable place to live. They want cheaper rent and they want to know that they're not going to be removed from their unit, especially if they're removed unfairly. They want more oversight to make sure the system works for them. Here's the problem though. So does the landlord. They want the system to work for them as well. And many of us in this province are missing the bigger picture about what the problem is with these rent controls. Let's get something out of the way really quickly in this video. Renting a property as a landlord, it is an investment, not philanthropy. This is part of the conversation that is so often missed in this process because so many tenants just assume that every single landlord in the province is some greedy, rich, mega property mogul that has all the money in the world, and this couldn't be any further than from the truth. In fact, on that very same video we posted about the death of private rentals in BC, look at the silly comments left by tenants who are completely engulfed by emotion and not looking at the bigger picture. They said silly things just like, the whole business of buying and selling properties in Canada is shameful for humanity. Idiots who live based on abusing others. Or if rental prices were capped and didn't kick people out for rent eviction, this wouldn't have happened. Keep whining. All this is going to do is stop short-term renting. People love money too much. Or my very favorite, we could take houses from the investor's greed. You can see my response to this person where I said, what makes a person providing a home to someone who can't afford it greedy? Income rental controls to save the day. But the part of the conversation that is missing is profits are important. And you're probably thinking that landlords make a ton of profit when they rent out a rental property, especially in British Columbia. But if you knew the math of that, you probably wouldn't quite agree. Using the website talent.com and the website rentals.ca, I wanted to compare what the average Canadian wage was in various major cities across Canada in provinces that had both rental controls and non-rental controls. And I wanted to compare that with the amount that you would pay to rent out a, let's say, 2-bedroom condominium. If rental controls are indeed working, you would expect the provinces with rental controls to have cheaper rent based on the overall income of the people who are living there. Because rent controls aren't based on the cost of the property. Rent controls are based on how much people make and how much they can afford to live. In looking at 2 rent-controlled cities, Vancouver and Toronto, both in provinces with rent controls, you'll notice that based on the average income of someone in those major cities versus what they are going to pay to rent a 2-bedroom condominium, that in a year they are spending a range of anywhere between 53 to 63% of their gross annual income. Compare that with 3 other major cities in Canada: Calgary, Edmonton, and Regina, all in provinces that do not have rent controls. In Regina, it takes about 27% of someone's annual income to afford to rent a 2-bedroom condominium. Edmonton, 32%, and Calgary, 41%. This means the 3 major Canadian cities on this list have lower rents when compared to the annual income of the people who live in those very cities than compared to the major cities that have rent controls. This means that it's not even working, but this is just my own calculations. What do maybe some professionals say about rent controls? Take the think tank Brookings, an institution that is a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C., whose mission is to conduct in-depth, nonpartisan research to improve policy and governance at local, national, and global levels. In their article published, "What Does Economic Evidence Tell Us About the Effects of Rent Control?" They go on to say, new research examining how rent control affects tenants and housing markets offers insight into how rent control affects markets. While rent control appears to help current tenants in the short run, in the long run, it will decrease affordability, fuels gentrification, and creates negative spillovers on the surrounding neighborhood. Well, that's not overly glowing, but maybe you're thinking, well, I don't even know what Brookings is. He cherry-picked this. I have never even heard of them. Well, here's somebody you have heard of. In a similar article published by the Powerhouse magazine and think tank Forbes, titled "The Pros and Cons of Rent Controls for Landlords and Tenants," the very first paragraph states that while rent control appears to help housing providers in the short term, in the long run, it affects their investment and development plans. It goes on to say rent control has a long and hotly debated history. Although rent control has been shown to increase stability and affordability for tenants in controlled units, some studies have found that these benefits are offset by greater costs in the uncontrolled rental market because of reductions in the overall supply of rental units. There's a header called "The Unintended Consequences of Rent Control" in the article as well, going on to say, with rent control in effect, housing providers say they are faced with the difficult financial strain of absorbing essential maintenance costs and are forced to reduce investments in improvements and non-essential maintenance. As a result, 54% said they expect to or would consider selling some assets. This is particularly alarming for the apartment industry as the nation faces housing supply challenges and must build 4.3 million new apartments by 2035 to meet current shortages and address future demand. So they've just addressed what we would normally call slumlords, and they've also just addressed that there is going to be a massive sell-off in places if rent controls persist. Guys, even ChatGPT gets this. Look what happened when I typed into ChatGPT, what are rent controls? This is completely unbiased from artificial intelligence, who is apparently supposed to be smarter than all of us. Rent controls are government-imposed limits on the amount landlords can charge for renting out a property. The goal of rent control is to make housing more affordable by capping rent increases, usually tied to inflation or a set percentage. However, rent controls can lead to unintended consequences such as reduced investment in housing, lower property maintenance, and decreased supply of rental units, as landlords may find it less profitable to rent out or maintain properties. So what does less supply do to rental prices for tenants? I'm not going to give you the answer, but I'm going to give you a hint that it's not a good thing for market prices. But while you are thinking about that, for all of you out there who are convinced that landlords are all greedy, rich, property moguls and think that there is just a financial windfall by owning a rental unit, well, here's some numbers based on what it costs to buy the average apartment in Surrey and what it costs to maintain it. And then I'm going to let you know what the average rent for that unit might be. Using the average benchmark price of a condo in Surrey at $544,000, assuming that someone has put down at least 20% on the property, which is $108,000. At today's current mortgage rates of 4.74%, this means your mortgage every month is $2,467. Now, you've got to account for things like strata fees. We'll estimate them at about $450 per month. Property taxes to the city estimated to be about $133 per month. Insurance on the unit estimated to be about $80 per month. And City of Surrey utility charges estimated to be about $70 per month. Guys, we are talking about roughly $3,200 a month to own an investment property by putting down 20% or almost $110,000 to be able to even do it. According to real estate rental website Zumper.com, in Surrey, a 2-bedroom rents out for an average of $2,465. If you're doing the math at home, that's a shortfall for the landlord of about $730 per month. Let's take that even further, because I know you are sitting there stewing thinking that property values have gone up. People have far more equity in their properties based on when they may have bought them. So I just clearly proved that there's no new investors that have only 20% down coming into the market because it's simply not profitable. But what if somebody had 50% equity in the property, or they had 50% to put down on this average Surrey condo? Well, let's use the same math. 50% of a $544,000 condominium means they have about $272,000 to either put down, or they've got that amount of equity in the property. This means 50% of the total purchase price in terms of a mortgage at today's rates comes out to $1,542. Using the same strata fees, property tax, insurance costs, and utility charges by the city of Surrey, this works out to about $2,274 per month. If the tenant's still paying $2,465 per month on average, this means the landlord is making a measly $190 per month, or $2,280 per year. $2,280 per year to take all of that risk. And here's the things that we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about things like special assessments on the property, where the strata does a cash call for a major expense coming up in the building. We didn't talk about surprise repairs like a refrigerator breaking. We didn't talk about general maintenance or general wear and tear of the property, in which a landlord is responsible to maintain. Being a landlord is just not as profitable as many people think. Doing the math here and reading both the Brookings article and the Forbes article matches exactly what these landlords on that YouTube video have been saying. It's simply not as profitable as people think, and it is not lucrative anymore to be a landlord in the market of the Lower Mainland of British Columbia. So before I tell you what we should all do next, I'm gonna remind you to subscribe to the channel, because I want you to get updates on everything that has to do with real estate and the communities of White Rock, BC, Surrey, BC, and anything going on in the crazy world of British Columbia real estate, just like this very topic we're talking about on today's video. So what do we do? How do we make things better for everybody, both tenants and landlords? Because look, we need tenants and tenants need landlords. The idea that everybody has the ability to buy a property or wants to buy a property is just completely false. People choose to rent properties for various reasons, like the flexibility of being a renter or having just generally less responsibility versus that of an owner. They do it for many lifestyle reasons or work reasons. They do it because they don't simply have the finances at this point to buy a home, or the two most common reasons that I see in my real estate practice, that their expectations don't match their budget, thinking they're entitled to a brand new 3,000 square foot house in the middle of Vancouver for the price of a condominium in Surrey, or they just simply don't have the financial discipline to save money. Some people just are not going to own property for those reasons. But here's what we can do. Number one, we can push back on our elected officials, especially when they make announcements or they make things into law that just simply don't make sense. As a population, we should be demanding consultation with industry experts so embarrassments like what just happened don't happen anymore. But the bigger question is, and this is a question that I want you to leave your comment in down below, is how do we build a system that is beneficial for all, both landlords and tenants? How do we make it a win-win for everybody? And look, if you're gonna leave a comment, I want you to try and leave the emotion out of it and avoid silly comments that are completely based out of emotion and really the fact that you probably don't understand how this system really should work. Comments like this guy, expecting that someone else will work their entire life to pay rent so that the landlord can live like the Lord is sick. That's just a silly comment. So what I want you to comment down below is, what is one way that we could change this for the better? If you're a tenant and you'd like to suggest something that could be changed to make it more fair for a tenant that you think is unfair currently in our system, please leave the comment below. And if you are a landlord watching this video and there is a rule that is currently in play, I want you to leave a comment down below about what is unfair about it and why. And also maybe even leave your suggestion for what a better rule might be to replace it. The challenge for you to leave these comments down below is to, number one, don't act with emotion, competition. And number two, it's gotta be something fair for everybody. In the end, we wanna build a healthier future for the tenants and the landlords in British Columbia, and I'm gonna use the comments that you leave below for my next future video on this very topic about what can be done to make it better for everybody. And I promise you something at the beginning of this video. If you were a tenant who was sick of renting in the province of BC, I told you that you do not want to support the system that you absolutely hate. So what are ways that you can get out of this to make sure that you're starting to build on your own financial future? If you've been eyeing getting into the real estate market for some time, this is your chance. The first of two ways I will let you know about is access to our BC Home Buyers course. Over 3 hours of video content, PDF downloads, and questionnaires to help you understand how to buy a home effectively and properly anywhere in the province of British Columbia and avoid all of the pitfalls that so many home buyers experience. This course is usually sold for around $350, and for a very limited time, we're giving away 20 lifetime subscriptions for absolutely free. So check the description below to get your hands on yours before they're all gone. And what's number two? Well, maybe you have the financial means to buy a home right now, but you've been sitting on the sidelines, and I think that's a really big mistake. And I go all into the reasons why that's a huge mistake right now in this video right here, which is coming up next. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. Cheers.